Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT patch notes review. This week we'll be going through all the changes for patch 10.5 with the help of our challenger analysts. Be sure to keep in mind as we go through the buffs and nerfs that this is speculation for how the meta may change. With that said, let's get into our rundown for patch 10.5. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. All right, let's get back into the video. 10.5 isn't a large patch, and there are no game mechanics changes or item changes, so we'll start off with traits. Only a few traits are getting balance changes this week, but this particular trait change may bring back memories of previous metas as Blade Master is being buffed. The buff is not huge by any means, as it's only going from a 35% to a 40% chance to proc. But this does open the door for the return of various Blade Master builds, such as Old School Blender, Sivir and Friends, or it may just be buffing the current existing Blade Master build, the Yasuo carry. Next up is a buff to a trait that has been seeing a lot of use at the end of 10.4, Electric. It's not a large buff as it only affects the 4-piece trait, and it's only a damage increase of 50, going from 500 to 550. That said, it is interesting it's being buffed as 4 Electric is already considered pretty strong. The likely reason this was buffed is due to how rare it can be to find 4 Electric, as it requires a Lux, so it should actually feel really powerful when you do get it. As mentioned, Electric became a staple of the meta in 10.4, so it may not have been necessary to buff the trait. We'll have to see how it actually plays out, but a 50 damage increase to a rather hard to get 4-piece trait shouldn't make Electric overpowered by any means. The last trait change in 10.5 is to Glacial. At first glance, it seems like an odd change considering Glacials are doing well in the meta, but considering it's only a buff to the 6-piece trait, going from 350 damage to 375, it overall won't have much of an impact. Unfortunately, a buff of only 25 damage is unlikely to make 6 Glacial worth going for consistently and will remain a rarely seen composition. Despite that, Glacial is still going to be a very versatile trait in 10.5, as 2 and 4 Glacial are unchanged. That is it for changes to traits, so let's move on and talk about some changes to champions in 10.5. Beginning with the 1-cost champions, let's start with Diana. Diana has been in and out of the forefront of the meta for some time, even since she had a bug fix that made her orbs only hit 1 unit at a time. She's by no means terrible, but she's no longer the powerhouse early game champion that she once was. It's possible that this buff, which increases her shield duration from 3 seconds to 4, may make her a bit more appealing to play, though it's unlikely to bring her back to her former glory. This change does mark a standardization of shields according to Mortdog, who's one of the developers that does patch rundowns. Basically, 4 seconds is going to be a small shield, which is why Diana got an increase. Unfortunately, it's not a huge buff for her, but she may be slightly better in the early game now because of it. Another champion with a shield that's getting changed is Leona. As one of the best wardens in the game, it's not really a surprise that she's getting a nerf, though it's fairly small as her shield goes from 5 seconds down to 4. This change, as mentioned with Diana, is meant to standardize smaller shields to 4 seconds. Not much else really needs to be said, as Leona is still a great frontline option, though she'll be ever so slightly weaker. The last of our 1-cost champion changes to talk about is Zyra. Much like Diana, Zyra has been one of the best 1-cost champions in the game, but after several nerfs, she's fallen quite far. This buff lowers her total mana from 75 to 65, making it so she casts her ability a bit earlier in the fight. It's a nice change for Zyra, as she often takes too long to get an ultimate off if you aren't giving her mana items. That said, it's not a huge buff that's going to make her start dominating the early game again. Look to give her early tier items to increase her effectiveness, and she may actually return to being a decent 1-cost champion in the early game. All right, let's move on to the next tier with 2-cost champions, beginning with Syndra. Syndra is receiving a spell damage buff across all star levels, going from 175, 350, 600 to 225, 375, 650. While it isn't overall a big increase for 2-star Syndra, it does make her 1-star version much better. It's unlikely you'll go for a Syndra 3, but in the rare case that you do, this buff will make her even more potent. All in all, this is a good change for Syndra, as she's been one of the more lackluster champions in set 2, and mages definitely needed more than just Brand as a viable carry. There's one other 2-cost champion change in 10.5, and that is to Yasuo. He's getting a small small nerf to his total mana, going from 85 to 90. It's a bit of an odd change considering Yasuo proved to not be nearly as dominant in 10.4, so even a small nerf seems somewhat excessive here. But keep in mind, Blademaster did get buffed, so the two changes somewhat balance out each other. Overall, it's unlikely to drastically change how Yasuo plays in a fight, but worth keeping in mind that he's going to be getting his ability off ever so slightly slower. With 2 cost champions out of the way, let's go on to the next tier, starting with Ezreal. Ezreal getting buffed sounds strange since he's been one of the most contested champions in the early and mid game right now, but don't worry, as the buff is only to his 1-star variation spell, going from 225 damage up to 250, so it's not really a significant amount, and the rest of his star levels are unchanged. All this is really going to do is keep Ezreal a high priority pick, as he'll be a little bit stronger at level 1. Coming up next, we have adjustments to Karma. She is definitely an important piece to the current meta and may change slightly as her 1 and 2 star variants are getting nerfed. The change adjusts those values to put more power in her 3-star variation, going from a 40, 60, 80 bonus attack speed to a 35, 50, 100%. At level 1, this isn't much of a change, but at 2-star, losing 10% bonus attack speed will possibly reduce the value of Karma in 10.5. This is mostly just a straight nerf to Karma, as buffing any 3-star variation tends to not really matter, as it's such a rarity to actually get one. While it's likely she'll still be good to pair with a carry, her overall priority will likely go down, and other mystics such as Janna or Soraka will go up in priority. The last champion to get buffs for 3-star is Nocturne. The buff will increase his passive healing from 40, 45, 50% to 50, 60, 70%. It's a fairly large buff to each star level, but it's worth pointing out that ever since he got the bug fix, Nocturne dealing double damage when he spins, he has not been anywhere near as dominant as he used to be. But with these buffs alongside with a small increase to Blademaster proc chance, we may be seeing the return of Blender into the meta. With the spatula no longer being on carousel, it is unlikely that you will get that build every game though. It's even possible they won't be played at all considering how rare the spatulas can be. It's going to be interesting to see how Nocturne can fit in the meta if he's not able to be consistently turned into a Blademaster. Alright, the last set of champion balance changes will be to 4-cost champions, beginning with Janna. Janna is getting a much needed buff to her 3-star variation and small increases to her other star levels, as her spell healing goes from 20, 30, 100% to 25, 30, 200%. These are some nice small bumps to her effectiveness at level 1 and 2, and a huge increase to her 3-star variation. Unfortunately, as previously mentioned, it's such a rare thing to see a 3-star champion, especially at 4 cost. In the rare circumstance that you do manage to find it, she should really heal your entire team by a lot with this buff. Still, it's nice to see some overall good buffs to Janna. The last champion balance change to go over is to Twitch. Twitch is getting a small attack damage increase, going from a base of 65 up to 70. It's a bit odd considering he's in quite a balanced spot and is actually a great carry for Rangers. 5 damage is so little, it's not likely to have much of an impact on how he plays out in a fight, but it will make him scale slightly better and improve his ability to carry. Not a bad change, but just a bit unnecessary overall. Alright, that's the champion balance done, but there's still more to talk about as they're doing a bunch of changes to 3-star champions. We've already talked about her in the balance changes, but Diana is getting a buff to her 3-star variation, with the number of orbs increasing from 5 to 6. It's a good change, but it's unlikely to make much of an impact, as you will often not be going for Diana 3. Overall, it's just another buff to Diana to make her a little bit more viable. Another champion that received balance changes and is getting a 3-star adjustment is Zyra. She's having the number of plants she casts increase from 4 to 5 at level 3. Much like Diana, it's not a bad change and overall is good for Zyra, but it's not likely to matter that much. That said, Diana and Zyra have been buffed in multiple ways, and there may be the return of hyper rolling for them. Next is a champion that didn't get touched in this patch yet, Rek'Sai. Rek'Sai is having a rather large increase to her ultimate damage, going from 850 to 1000 damage at level 3. Keep in mind that this damage is true damage, so 1000 is a lot in that context. While most of the time you won't go for a 3-star champion, in the case of Rek'Sai, it's not unlikely that it will happen considering Predator. In that build, it's common to go for Kog'Maw, Rek'Sai, and Skarner 3, so Rek'Sai getting a buff will likely make that composition even stronger in 10.5. Moving on, we have a 50 spell damage buff to Mundo 3, going from 150 damage to 200. Here's another champion that you generally don't look to 3-star, but with Berserkers being more popular in the meta right now, it's not improbable to do. do that. It's likely not going to matter too much for Mundo, especially since it's only 50 damage. Zed is getting a crazy change to his 3-star ability in 10.5, going from 50-25 0 mana reduction to 50-25 minus 125 after he clones. Basically, this means a lot of Zeds. It's more or less a for fun change, as a 5-cost champion rarely ever gets 3-starred. Speaking of fun changes, Lux is getting a huge increase to her 3-star spell damage, from 9,999 spell damage to 99,999 spell damage. This is a ridiculous increase, but will almost never matter in a real game. All right, folks, that is it for today's patch notes review. Patch 10.5 is the last patch of Set 2, so have fun playing on this patch for the next 2 weeks. It's another small patch overall, but certainly an entertaining one with all of the 3-star champion changes. Are you guys excited for the very last patch of Set 2? Let us know in the comments below. Also, be sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you all for the next Giant Slayer TFT video.